My name's Kieran Fowler. I'm a cinematographer. I guess it just grew naturally. I never wanted to be a cinematographer when I was younger. It just something that organically kind of happened. Basically, there was a few people, some of my family friends, that were involved in the film industry back in New Zealand, who also aroused my interest. But when I was a young kid, I kind of was making movies with my friends a lot, and I'd always be behind the camera. And I kind of thought at one point, well, actually there is a sort of a career path in camera operating, and then I progressed to study cinematography because that was the only course that had camera involved in it, and then that just grew my interests so much to, obviously become or start shooting. I guess it's a mixture of luck and being in the right place, and also having a little bit of talent to sort of progress that luck into something more. So basically, yeah, I guess it just started about being a passionate filmmaker, and always, kept that motivation and drive. Through 2 years of studying, I would constantly be learning outside of that studying and trying to get on set, and I was so passionate, and I guess I met some great people after studying that had some good creative mindsets that I really sort of gelled with, and that helped me get some good sort of footage for my reel and good projects. And I was just fortunate enough to have these projects that sort of expanded my sort of range of people that I met, like filmmakers, and I just got more opportunities after that. I mean, yeah, I guess it's a bit of luck and a little bit of talent to sustain that luck, I guess. Yeah, it's a funny place where I'm at the moment. So I've just done my first feature in Australia, and previous to that I did a feature film in Vietnam. And apart from that, the main bulk of my work up until these two features have been music videos and a little bit of commercials, which is starting to progress more and more nowadays. I'm starting to take back in more commercial work, but yeah. So at the moment, I'm just working between here, New Zealand, Vietnam, and wherever other jobs take me. So Terminus was a project directed by Mark Fermi. It's a sort of a science fiction thriller drama set in America about a small town mechanic's chance finding with a meteorite. And basically, this was a fairly small budget production in terms of what the project was. It was a very ambitious project. And we managed to get a great crew on board and a great cast on board. And yeah, it was a beast of a project. It was a 30-day shoot. There was so many points in pre-production where we thought this project wasn't going to happen, and all that kind of thing. So it was really a crazy project, but we're here now and it's finished, and it's just secured a distribution in Australia. And yeah, basically I met Mark through another one of our a mutual friend of ours. Basically, I'd just come back from Vietnam from shooting a feature film over there, and this mutual friend of mine texted me one night and said, "Oh, I've got this director who needs someone to shoot this web series." And at that point, I didn't have too much work on, and I basically said, "Well, why not? I love shooting. No matter what. Like, I just like to shoot if I've got nothing on." So I was like, "Oh yeah, I'll meet this director, and I'll shoot this thing." And basically I met up with Mark, and we hit it off, and we were talking about this web series we're doing at the moment, but after the fact we'd also talk about what we were doing, and I showed him stills and things from this Vietnamese feature, and that progressed into a really good relationship. Not only a good friendship, but a good working relationship where we started doing music videos together, and building up a really good sort of creative mindset together, which is something I think is really important to with collaborations in this industry. And yeah, so that's basically how I met Mark. Once I was asked to come on board Terminus, we started pre-production straight away. So Mark and I would spend multiple days in offices just sort of going through the script, just building up imagery and all sorts of things, and meeting up with the whole production team and how we're actually going to do this. And yeah, from then on it was just many late nights and yeah, just working through that side of things. Well, the biggest challenge again was obviously the tight budget, the tight schedules. That was, you know, a ramification of that tight budget. You know, some of the biggest things was the constant rewrites. I think the script was rewritten, you know, 8 to 10 times. You know, the first time I read the script is so different to the film we actually made in the end, which isn't a bad thing. Like, obviously there's a reason for that, you know, because of the budget limitations and all of that, kind of just organically make this final product. But, you know, that was a massive challenge for me, because obviously every time they change the script, that makes big changes to my lighting plans or any prior pre that I'd done before, to the point where there was changing so much that I had to just kind of forget about doing proper lighting plans until the, you know, nights before the actual shooting days, just because it was that many rewrites. But again, yeah, the budget thing was a massive challenge as well. It meant that I needed to be smarter and where I used my bigger equipment choices. You know, I couldn't just have a massive truck of 6Ks and 12Ks for the whole shoot. I needed to be selective on which days I needed what equipment, and all of that. So that obviously makes scheduling a harder beast to tame, because it you know, it's constantly changing and all that. So we used Panavision. We used the ARRI Alexa in 4x3, and we shot anamorphically with Panavision close focus primos and C-series lenses to finish that range off, because that didn't quite do the longer end of the lenses. We also had B-series Panavision anamorphics for a lightweight option. We also had a macro lens in there, and also a couple of spherical lenses just for some underwater housing, for some underwater scenes. So it was a big mixed bag of lenses, but it was great. You know, I chose the Panavision close focus primos. Basically, that means you don't need to use the diopters to get close to the actors, and they've just got this beautiful. It's not too vintagey and it's not too clinical kind of look to them. You know, they still get that artifacting where you get the distortion on the wider end of the lenses and those classic flares, but they're not over the top. And I thought that was like a perfect choice for Terminus. We weren't afraid to to let the lenses flare out and create us these horizontal streak flares across our images, because in a way that was for us a little throwback to, you know, those old school science fiction films like Blade Runner and E.T., and because Terminus had this sort of otherworldly feel to it, we thought that'd be great. You know, it's adding almost an otherworldly feel to the lenses, you know, using the imperfections. But yeah, and I think for the rest of the visual language, like our camera movement was very much in that kind of vein. We would predominantly start with a moving master, and most of our coverage, we said, would be locked off and more concise and calculated. But you know, in times where we thought the tension was right, or the feel or the emotions were right, we would use the handheld camera work, and that kind of harps on about the contemporary filmmaking, because that's, you know, that's a revelation of smaller cameras and people loving that aesthetic. Yeah, a lot of people are using Alexa. I mean, there's a good reason. I absolutely love the colour rendition it creates. It's got such a beautiful colour science behind that sensor. And yeah, it's just very intuitive, basically, like, you know, operating with the Alexa, it's so ergonomic, and obviously getting it in places grip-wise is quite easy as well. But yeah, the big sell for me is obviously the image quality. It's, you know, colour tone rendition in any lighting situation is really amazing. Like, and especially like Terminus, for example, we had, you know, lighting situations where I was putting sodium and mercury kind of urban-y, you know, dirtier tones, and it would just render the skin tones quite nicely under those conditions. You know, and that's what you need in a camera these days, especially with, you know, the amount of low light shooting you're doing and using actual practical street lights and stuff. It makes a massive difference if you can still hold that sort of nice skin tone within that kind of area of colour. I think it's great. There's a fine line between, you know, having really murky images and making it creative. But it's funny because the choice is out there. There's definitely lenses that are anamorphic and really clinical, and actually Argo shot on those lenses. But again, yeah, there's the old vintage lenses that, like something like Killing Them Softly shot on. And these are the old vintage dirty sort of look. But again, I'm more of a person who likes have those options as a tool bag, and I'll never say, oh, well, that's a bad choice. Like, you never do that. Like, I'm very open to that choice, and if it suits the scene or if it suits the film, then I think you should definitely do it. Like, for example, in Terminus, we used old B series for some of the flashbacks, and we opened them wide up because they sort of fell apart when they were wide open, and really, you know, use that flair and that horrible, as you're saying, maybe muddier image or more, you know, less clinical image as a creative choice in the flashbacks. And I think, you know, that's a powerful thing as a filmmaker, is if you don't sort of realise that these are options you can use, then, I don't know, I guess you've got different styles of filmmaking, yeah. Our format, we basically shot 2K, anamorphic 4x3 on the Alexa, and we were just shooting onto S/S cards. Basically, again, with the budget reasons for the production, we couldn't go down the RAW route because that would add a whole lot more onto you know, the whole data and DIT part of the production. I think the costs were quite massive when you think about it, because you've not only got your on-set data, but it's also, you know, all the visual effects and storage and everything, you know. So yeah, we just kept it simple, and I think it works. Like, it's quite good. The ProRes that camera spits out is really nice. So we recorded in ProRes 444. I'm a guy who likes, obviously, to use the most I can in terms of resolution, because I think that helps a lot. But I think sometimes people get a little bit too picky in terms of, you know, what is the resolution they're watching on the cinema screen, because, you know, some of the great films you've watched before, and some of the stuff with the early Alexa stuff is, you know, full HD, and it still looks great on the cinema screen. It's like 16mm, it's like the Black Swan, you know, that's 16mm, and no one says, oh, where's the fucking resolution? It's like, well, you know, I mean, that worked for the story, to be honest. But yeah, no, I think people have watched a lot of full HD, and you know, it's very, very pleasant results. Not to say that I wouldn't use a 2.8K now. I mean, of course I would, but yeah. Well, our lighting package, basically I fitted the whole production in Terminus with a pretty concise truck of lights. Like, I think the biggest HMIs we had would be like 6K constantly. Obviously there was a few big night exteriors where I had to bring in bigger lamps, which we had to schedule specifically for, but other than that, actually Terminus was, there was very few scenes that were that expansive at night, or that really called on for a bigger lighting package. And I mean, a lot of our day interiors were on a set, so we could control it with what lights we had. And there was a lot of night, you know, sort of night interior scenes where I'd just use a nice tungsten package or some Kinos. But I did have a few lights that were my go-to, that my gaffer, Michael Adcock, and also Mark Jeffries made up for me, which were these, we called them Lego lights, and they were these big sort of, I think about 4x4 sort of, or 4x8 kind of boxes that housed about 25 bulbs in them. So they made this sort of nice soft source, and we'd run them on 3 different channels, so we could separately dim each channel, and you know, we could create fire effects with them because we had 3 different channels, and also, you know, dim this section or turn this section off. And we also had smaller versions, which were like 4x1 foots, and you know, 2x2s and 1x1 panels. So we had all these different sort of shapes of like Lego bricks, basically, that you could make all these different soft sources of tungsten bulbs, and they were great because they just provided like an easy to rig solution and a nice soft light in some of the interior tungsten sets. Well, I think that starts early in pre for me. Like, obviously when I'm on the recce's, it's about responding to the location that you go there, and you know, that's the best thing for me, is to actually see the location and respond to that. And also obviously have the story in mind, because you know, you can go to a location, you can say, well, okay, so there's a whole row of windows on the left side here, which would be great to punch a hole, you know, some strong lights through. Or if you want an overcast look, because the story calls for it, maybe you just set up a whole heap of, you know, bounce sources through those windows. And so it's a combination between, you know, what the story is calling for and what the location's giving you. Yeah, but obviously when I'm lighting a scene as well, I've got to take into account the blocking of the actors. And I try and discuss with the director prior to that our intentions of camera coverage and blocking, and I'll usually have a thinking mind in terms of lighting, like where the windows are or where I can put a practical light if it's an interior night scene. And from that, basically, I'll just create sort of a blueprint for myself, like just a little mud map. And then I'll be so flexible with that on the day. I'll go in to do it. But if for some reason I feel like we can do something different for a better reason, I'm so open to that. So yeah, that's sort of part of my process. Some scenes and some lighting situations really do require for marks to be hit. But then again, like I totally take into consideration the actors' roles and respect their performances. So I generally actually like to light like a bit of the area. Yeah, like when I'm doing my lighting plans, I'll light an area more than say an actor who's over there in that corner or an actor in there, and try and create an overall contrast. So obviously, if it's a night interior, I'll try and keep the back down and light up these small parts where the actors are going to be pushing through. But obviously, close-ups and tighter coverage, I find. If your lighting is broad enough, you can be fairly flexible, I think. Yeah, and I think you've got to consider that as well. Like you can't keep the actors locked down too specifically to a mark. In terms of moving closer from a wide to a tight, in general, I guess I like to move my lights in and my frames in just to soften it off. But usually I'll set the tone and levels in my wide, and I won't be doing too much. I mean, I won't be swapping out lights. Sometimes I'll bring a bounce source in instead of using a direct source sometimes, because you can get away with harder light in a wide shot. Yeah, a lot of the times it'll just be moving in lamps closer or adding a little bit of an eye light or a bounce source to catch the eyes or something like that. My early discussions with Mark, we watched a lot of films. We took inspiration from old sci-fi films like E.T. and stuff, but visually a lot of Finch's stuff we took inspiration from. We really thought the story called for sort of this muted look, this kind of gritty, sort of not overly stated in terms of lighting look, like not contrived, but something that really played on the tone of that, like a town that had sort of been not abandoned, but had this depression or this down feel about it. So in terms of my lighting approach, I took a lot of inspiration from Finch's films, because I think his subtleties and soft light really suit that, because they're not overly stated and they're not overly contrived, but they kind of create this stickiness. And I think that really is what I was trying to create in Terminus as well. Just using quite gritty sort of colour tones, like, again, the urban sodiums and mercuries, and yeah. So yeah, nothing too unnatural, I guess. Again, it's like responding to the locations. I wouldn't force too much backlight or something that made it feel like the filmmakers were really present. I mean, I guess the whole team were a big part of the reason that we got through Terminus, because it was such a beast and it was such a challenge that I was so lucky to have such a good camera crew and everyone involved. I got on board a lot of the camera guys I'd worked with previously. Like my first assistant / focus puller was Adam Lynch, who I'd worked with in Vietnam before. And so we had a really good relationship and sort of, really good second hand with each other. So we didn't need to talk much, and we already sort of knew how to, knew what to do, which made a massive difference. And a lot of the other guys I hadn't actually worked with in the camera department, but I got I got Adam and others to crew them on board. And because of that, they were great guys, and we all got along like a family. It was quite hard actually to crew in terms of grip and gaffer, because at the time there was quite a few other features shooting at that time, like Unbroken, I think Water Diviner, there was another one, Mad Max was doing reshoots, I think. So a lot of the crew were actually already busy, but I was lucky enough to get Mark Jeffries and Michael Adcock as the gaffer, who are really experienced guys, and also to get David Litchfield as the key grip, which was amazing. I always operate, yeah. I think it's something about it, like I feel like it's very important composition and also framing and everything like that, and I just love to be right beside the camera that's recording the images and right near the actors as well, so I can respond in that way. I think it's really important to be operating, because I don't know, I guess I have real instinctual choices about, you know, the way I want to frame things, or, you know, organically, because you know, with operating, I guess you can do as much rehearsal as possible, but if there's a certain thing during the take that you need to respond to, it's quite hard when you've got someone else to, unless you've got a really good relationship with them. But I think, you know, the best thing is to really get behind the camera yourself. Well, I think actually there's a few scenes where I think I overcooked the flares a little bit, but some of them work creatively in some tense moments, which was kind of like a happy sort of accident kind of thing. Another part, like there's a scene at the end of the film which I'd love to go back and just sort of relight in a different way. I wouldn't do too much more, but I just felt like, you know, it's just the small things, I guess, when you watch your own work. You say, oh, you know, I could have cut the background down more there, and you know what I mean? Like, yeah, there was a few scenes where I thought that, you know, I could have taken the background down a little more and made it a bit darker, and, you know, maybe even lost the backlight and stuff like that. There was a few things, just because I thought, well, you know, maybe I'm not being bold enough as a cinematographer here, because, you know, I actually really think I could probably, you know, lose this backlight and just play it all, you know, fairly soft and create the contrast in a soft key. There was a few times where I thought that, but I guess, yeah, I guess that's always the case, isn't it? I think it got a good reaction, actually. Like, I was pleasantly surprised. I was sitting up at the back and sort of half watching, you know, all my errors that I was making on the screen, and then half watching if people were actually watching the film and not, you know, looking at their watches that they were bored. And it seemed like people were actually, you know, genuinely sort of in the story, you know, for the most part that I saw, which is good. Like, that's the best thing as a filmmaker is, you know, obviously it's all about the end product, and it's not just about my visuals, it's about how's everyone's, you know, collaborations come together, and how's that made a film that gets people involved in as an audience, because that's what you want to do. And I think, you know, we, you know, partly did that with Terminus, you know, in the most part, and I think that was really, really great. Yeah. In this day and age, I mean, like, obviously my rise through the ranks wasn't traditional at all. I would just say, like, you've got access to cameras and everything, so I think you just need to really be shooting. And I think the biggest thing for me, and I think for other you know, younger DOPs that want to shoot as well, is to always be curious. Like, my curiosity's never stopped, and it's a big part. Like, the more curious you are, the more you'll learn, and the more you'll push yourself to be a better cinematographer. And also, I think it's also vital for younger people to also have their idols and look at how other people have done things. You know, there's so many ways of doing things. There's not just one way of becoming a cinematographer, and I think people get paranoid about that sometimes. Paranoid by the fact that, you know, oh, I have to do it this way to actually get there. But you don't. You just, you know, you got to understand what it is to be a cinematographer, obviously. And but there's not one set route to do it. You know, there's people like Roger Deakins who didn't assist, or Rodrigo Prieto who didn't assist, and then there's other DOPs that definitely came up through the assisting ranks, like Wally Pfister and things like that. Obviously, I like to choose my formats for the project. Really, like, I shoot things on 16mm still, and, you know, obviously smaller and larger sensors. I mean, with digital, obviously, like, I stick more around the Super 35 side of things. But yeah, like, I think, yeah, people can become so involved with the specs and, you know, looking up tests on Vimeo of trees in the wind and stuff like this. And like, at the end of the day, like, I think, like, if you have a really good project with a great story and a great collaboration with someone, like, that's where your best work's going to come from. Not to say that you shouldn't shoot it with a bad camera. I'm just saying, you know, if you do shoot a really great project with a bad camera, it's probably not going to be, you know, a really great story with a bad camera. It's, you know, it's not the end of the world. Like, I think the story is king when it comes down to things.